Hi class, welcome to Module 1 of Sociology of Sex and Gender. You're going to find in this first class that you don't, first module, that you don't have a chapter to read. You have a number of places I want you to look at to kind of explore and get familiar with sociology. I know some of you have taken sociology classes before, but not all of you. So I want to give you a background of what sociology is. And sociology is the study of society. It is a social science involving the study of social lives of people, groups, and societies. And the studies our behavior as a social being, conveying everything from the analysis of short contacts from one another. Zimmel looks at the introduction of a stranger in a room and how we react to that. Some of the researchers look at studies such as suicide and how it affects the society as a whole and what brings that into place. It looks at the global pictures of the social process. It looks at the individual. So I'm going to pop over to a quick PowerPoint and we'll talk about some of this before we get going on your module. So, sociology, beyond those first two things I've mentioned, is a scientific study. We use research. We look at societies and we put them through multiple ways of figuring out what's going on. Sometimes we do it by observation. Sometimes we do it by surveys. We do both qualitative and quantitative research. But it is a scientific studies of the societies look at and how we move through our lives and how life is attacked. It has the overarching unification of all studies of humankind. And social sciences include political science, psychology, economics. There are parts of history like applied history, which are more of a social science, applied geology, which is more of a social science. And all of those are tied together as we look at humankind in sociology. So it is really a broad study of how we explore things. Now, the sociological imagination is something that we often talk about in sociology class. It's a term coined by C. Wright Mills. It's a tool to help us to connect our personal experiences to society at large and those greater historic forces. And it makes the familiar strange. In other words, if I'm studying sex and gender and I'm used to the issues of a woman's perspective in the process, we look especially then, I'm saying, okay, it's this way because I lived it that way. But that's not necessarily true, is it? I'm significantly older than many of you in this class. My experience is very different. My experience is based on other social conditions that come into place, such as my social economic standing, such as the location in the country I was raised, my parents, the differences in our homes, all of those things. So it makes you look afresh at what's going on, that what you think is familiar, you look at from the aspect of it being strange, to question why these things are in place and what happens, and to take away that idea that we can assume that we know what the process is in someone else's expectation. So, throughout this course, I'm going to be asking you to use your sociological imagination. Step away from what you think you know and find out what's really there. That it is not something that you just know it's going to be this way. In many cases in this class, you're going to be asked to go out and ask questions of someone different than you or someone similar to you to see how their experiences come into place and to see what is natural to us may not be natural to someone else. So, what is a social institution? Social institutions are the networks of structures in society that work to socialize the groups of people within them. So like the legal system, the labor market, the educational system, the military, the family. The family is one of those big social institutions. We will see that come throughout sex and gender, as well as the educational system and the legal system that defines based on this social construct that comes into place. So what's social identity? It's the way the individual defines themselves in relationship to the group they are part of, or in relationship to groups that they choose not to be a part of. What group did you fit in high school? Were you part of the geeks? Were you part of the nerds? Were you part of the goth? Were you part of the smart ones or the sports ones? And why did you fit or why did you not fit? How did you form your social identity? If we think about that in the fact of those peer groups that come into place and how they fit, think how it ties together to just determine what our social identity is and how gender starts coming into place. Now, the history of sociology, to give you some. Auguste Comte is considered the father of sociology. He was trained as a philosopher, as with many areas of college study, math, all of those come out of philosophy. Auguste Comte said society is better understood by determining the logic or the scientific laws governing human behavior. And he called it social physics or positivism. Other sociologists that followed are in looking at sociology. We can look at Harriet and Martin Hugh. First to translate Comte's work written into English, was one of the earliest feminist social science. And then we know other social sciences in history, such as Karl Marx. He is considered the father of conflict theory. And he looked at the historical materialism and what identified class and conflict out in society. Some significant pieces coming into place. Max Weber, notice how it's Weber, not Weber, emphasized the issues of subjective becoming the foundation for interpretive sociology. Emile Durkheim was the founder of the positive sociology and developed theories as far as division of labor helps to determine how social cohesion is maintained and not maintained. And he's really kind of that father of what we call the structural functional part of sociology, where we look at society as held together by these rules into place, and when we deviate from them, there becomes disbalance. Where we know with Marx, if I can step back to that, and we look at conflict theory, he looks at the power of one group over another. Now, in this, I give you a sociologist you may not have been exposed to unless you've taken another course from me, and that's George Simmel. And he looked at formal sociology, or sociology for pure numbers, how a group of two is different than a group of three. So he looks at dyads and triads and how things are different within that. I mentioned him before earlier in this quick video, that he talks about the stranger, the introduction of that outside port, and how that stranger affects a group, whether it be a group of two or three or a larger group, and the difference in the cohesion of the group and how it fits within society. So the theories of sociology, functionalist, conflict, feminist, symbolic interaction, postmodernism, and mid-range are all modern sociology theories that you'll be running into within the course of studying sociology. Some different things to consider there. We look at all of those theories, but as we're looking at sex and gender, we often go back to feminist theory. Now, feminist theory does not mean that we're looking strictly from the woman's side. It means that we look at the effect of gender, especially on the roles of society, and especially on how the structure of society comes into place. Important things to consider. Some early American sociologists that have been prominent at the University of Chicago, um, so that the perspective that emerges is known as the Chicago School. The Chicago thinkers include Charles Horton Cooley, George Herbert Mead, H.I. Thomas, W.E. Du Bois, and Jane Addams. Now, if you remember that picture at the very beginning of our course on the content page, you will see pictures of these people. Now, the Chicago School focused on empirical research and with the belief that people's behaviors and personalities are shaped by their social environments. Now, Cooley and Mead really give us that structural functional, step away from structural functional and give us that symbolic interactionist piece. And we look at the issues that occur. Now, Mead is an American sociologist trained at Oberlin that ends up at the Chicago School and really giving us that foundation out there. Cooley gives us the theory called the looking glass theory, that we see ourselves based on how we think society sees us. You see, one of the problems with teaching online is I'm looking at a picture here going up of my PowerPoints I've made for you and not knowing how you're reacting to them. In a classroom, I get that feedback coming into place. And if you're looking at me like, I don't understand any of this, and I see that in your eyes, then I perceive myself as a bad teacher. Or you in that process of not picking it up, right? But can you see how through a lifetime of period, you're facing that judgment from someone else, that it affects your perception of yourself. And it really ties to the issues of sex and gender. Now, sociology and its cousins. Sociology focuses on making comparisons across cases to find patterns. They create hypotheses about how societies work and how they worked in the past. And sociology looks at how individuals interact with each other, as well as how they work in groups, large, small, and interact in those individual levels as well. We look at the effect of those big groups on the individual and the individual on the big groups and what comes into place. The divisions within sociology are looking at the microsociology, the understanding of the local, the local interactional context, focusing on face-to-face encounters and gathering like Cooley and that looking glass self, and the macrosociology that looks at that social dynamic across society, and the large part of them often relies on this statistical analysis to do it. So especially in microsociology, we may be looking at the government roles. What's the law? How does it differ by gender? We can look at that big piece that comes into place, and we think of those historical patterns that we'll be looking at throughout. So, sociology of sex and gender. Why study this as a separate area of sociology? We bring up sex and gender, and when I'm teaching sociology of childhood or social problems, or when Dr. Madigan's teaching sociology of religion, we look at those things. But why study it separately? Well, the sociology of sex and gender is one of the most significant and most exciting fields of contemporary sociological research and thought. It's the foundation for feminist theory and research methods that are tied to feminist theory. It pulls us into a very much a conflict type theoretical approach with the research built on looking at the individual and that group of broken out by sex and gender. The discipline of sociology has been a leading academic field in the creation of new and innovative paradigms that study and analyze social behavior and social theory and social phenomena from the perspective of women and women's roles in social life. Now, prior to that real focus on feminism, everything was studied pretty much from a male perspective, and we can see that in some of the other fields as well. So when we look at psychology and we look at the fact that women were considered to be hysterical versus men having problems of the same type and the different levels of stress, and the treatment became very different. So I give you a link here to go in to look at the disciplines, some information on the sociology and the disciplines of sociology of gender. Another I would like you to look at is here, another sociologist action looking at gender, and these links will take you over to have you address that. And we'll be addressing some of these other things as the text goes through, but a good summary of theories is located at this particular website for you. And so all of these links should be working within the PowerPoint, which is located in the link below the module lecture. So please make sure you've read the syllabus as you've begun the course. Contact me about what you don't understand. View the videos for each module and then move forward with the assignments and discussions that go on in the class. So let me close this and move on to this. So we're back where you started, except when you start, you will have this module video in place for you. And I want you to go through these, read this. This is your reading for the week. Much faster to get through. And it goes over some more information that you can look at on your own. Then view the TED Talk. And you're going to see this. It's entitled The Danger of the Single Story. And I really want you to think about how that ties to the sociological imagination as you start to explore it. Then I've given you a link to a reading on the Cliff Notes on the sociology of social theories, the perspective of the three major theories, and a quick little video on a crash course on major sociology paradigms. Your first video online is not here, actually. Your videos for this course will not be from the library. The library has gone away from using Films on Demand. So all the films for the course I am trying to find from other locations. So I will correct that as I get this posted, but some theories and some readings for you. With that said, as you've finished, I want you to view another piece on the sociology of gender, and you'll begin your first discussion board. Your first discussion board, if you click on, will bring you over to the discussion section. And let me bring you up to that discussion question. Your discussion question for the week is just, why are you interested in the topic of sociology of sex and gender? And how do you see this course benefiting you? And how might you help others in this area? So as you describe that, you're talking about yourself. You might relate it back to some of the information that you've already learned from the course. You'll notice that you have your rubric available here, as well as under the content area for what you need to put in your original first post. Remember, your first post is due by Wednesday at 11:30 p.m. so that you'll have enough time to comment on 3 others. Now, There are no questions at the end of this chapter since you didn't have a chapter. So what's the question for this week and how are you going to answer it? Well, the question here is, what is sociology? How does understanding it affect your life? Explain the sociological imagination in your review. Now, if you recall from your syllabus, you are to write 2 to 3 pages. Make sure that you reference it and use APA format as you're writing this up and return it in through the Dropbox. So your first writing is actually very simple compared to many of the others that follow. And I'm looking forward to getting to know you a lot more through your discussion boards and your weekly submissions. Have a great day.